Welcome, everyone, to a new week of shows here at the Call Sheet Podcast at the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. It's Thanksgiving week. I'm a big fan of the Thanksgiving holiday. Talk more about that momentarily. It's a great week. Well, if you're trying to gain weight, man, this is your week. I equate Thanksgiving to the Super Bowl of eating. And I think that it's something that beyond just the gluttony that takes place. There's a lot of value in Thanksgiving. It's a great week for football. You're going to get championships across the country in high school. You're going to get rivalry week in college football as some of the sport's greatest rivalries amp up. You're going to get Thanksgiving Day games as the NFL pushes around the bend, so to speak, into the final third of the season. Really awesome week for football and just to be an American. And so let's get into it right here on our Monday morning Game Balls show. Got some interesting individuals and themes to which we're going to award Game Balls today. If you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, there's a good amount of Steeler fans who listen to this podcast. You're probably not going to love the first two people I'm about to honor. But we call it as we see it here on the Call Sheet Podcast. This is not a Pittsburgh-centric podcast by any stretch of the imagination. And so let's start out of the gate with Cleveland Browns quarterback Shedeur Sanders. Game ball, Shedeur Sanders, who made his NFL debut last week, and it did not go well. It did not go well. He entered the game in relief of Dylan Gabriel, who'd been knocked out with a concussion. Sanders had not had any reps at all with the first team. And I'm not just talking about last week. I'm talking about at all in his rookie campaign. And as you can imagine, that does not set you up for success. He went 4 for 16 for 47 yards. He looked overmatched and unprepared. But given now a week to prepare, he was able to pilot the Browns to a victory over the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, that's not exactly like knocking off the Chiefs or the Eagles, but a win is a win in the NFL. And he looked downright respectable doing it. The numbers aren't flashy. He only completed 11 out of 20 passes, but they went for 209 yards. If you average over 10 yards per attempt, that's a darn good day. 66 of those went on a screen pass to running back Dylan Sampson that Sampson shook a couple of defenders and took to the house. But still, Shedeur Sanders played composed football. Only turned the ball over once. Looked like a guy who had a much better understanding of what he wanted to do in the pocket. One of the splash plays he made was when he actually escaped the pocket and then threw a beautiful ball down the field to Isaiah Bond, went for a 52-yard gain. But the thing I like the most about what we saw from Shedeur Sanders on Sunday was his response to adversity. It doesn't take me to tell you that he has been one of the most polarizing figures since he was drafted. We won't recount that entire story, but as you know, man, many detractors, many supporters, all of it overblown for a guy taken in the 5th round. And that debut last weekend, if you were a Shedeur hater, gave you plenty of ammunition to be a hater. And so, with a bright spotlight on him, he was able to play the quarterback position well and lead Cleveland to a win. And that's game ball worthy. Another interesting individual, particularly if you're a Steelers fan, to whom we're going to award a game ball, George Pickens, wide receiver, Dallas Cowboys, had another monster day as Dallas really shocked the football world, down 21-0 to the Eagles. If the Eagles have you down 21-0, you should be dead and buried. Because what's that mean? That means they're going to now lean on Saquon Barkley and that big physical offensive line and just grind the life out of you. But that did not happen in Dallas yesterday. Philly goes up 21-0, and the Cowboys claw their way back and win on a walk-off Brandon Aubrey field goal, 24-21. That is a shocking result. And George Pickens, front and center, once again, 9 catches, 146 yards, and a touchdown. George Pickens is on pace this year for a monster season. He's on pace for 104 catches, over 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns. They would all be career highs. But the thing that is the most notable, perhaps, about George Pickens is that other than last week, when the Cowboys sat both Pickens and CeeDee Lamb for the first quarter of their game because they'd been late for the team bus, there have been no disruptions from George Pickens. No on-field antics, no locker room rants, no assistant coaches having to try to calm him down as he's losing his mind on the sideline. All of those things doomed his tenure in Pittsburgh. So much so that Mike Tomlin, who is arguably one of the most player-friendly head coaches in the NFL, at least in terms of his ability to deal with big personalities and some of the issues that come with those big personalities, Mike Tomlin basically gave up on George Pickens, said, we got to get this guy out of here. He was such a locker room cancer that they shipped him off to Dallas for a third-round draft pick. And at the time, it didn't look like a bad deal. It looked like Dallas was taking on a massive headache and giving Pittsburgh a pretty respectable draft pick in return. And the argument about George Pickens has always been, man, if that guy could just get his other stuff right, because his on-field talent is through the roof. He's as talented a receiver as any player in the league, but he dooms himself with all the other stuff. And so far, 11 games into the 2025 season, there hasn't been any other stuff, or at least much other stuff from George Pickens. He has just dedicated himself to playing football. Now, it's a contract year. Maybe that plays into it. Who will George Pickens be a year from now? Who knows? Can't answer those questions. But for right now, 11 weeks into 2025, he's been excellent. Game ball, George Pickens. Game ball to the counter gap run scheme. Counter gap, which is really experiencing, I don't know if I want to call it a renaissance. Maybe that is the right term, but counter gap is everywhere in the NFL. Everybody runs inside zone. That's just a staple. It's in all 32 NFL playbooks. Most teams run outside zone. Teams have a way to get to the perimeter. Maybe it's pin and pull sweep, whatever. They got a perimeter scheme. But until very recently, if you wanted to run a B gap power run scheme, you ran old school power. You're blocking down on the front side. You're kicking out with a fullback or an H-back. You're wrapping up with a linebacker or with a backside guard to the linebacker. Everybody had the power scheme in their playbook. But I'm seeing far less power and far more counter gap. The difference isn't significant. I mean, the scheme is basically the same, except the guard and whoever's wrapping up to the linebacker just switch places. Rather than have a fullback or an H-back kick out, you now have the guard kick out, and the fullback or the H-back wraps up to the linebacker. But we're seeing counter gap being run in so many different incarnations, so many different variations. It's fascinating. It's great to see because it's such a useful scheme. You can do it from an empty set. You can do it from a double tight end 22 personnel set with a fullback. You can run the quarterback. You can run it as a read scheme. You can run it as an RPO scheme. I mean, if you just want to hand the ball to the back, it's a great downhill run scheme as well. but we're seeing so many different versions of counter gap at all levels of football. Dan Casey, who is one of the most popular coaches on the internet in terms of his content on Twitter and Instagram. I mean, he always features interesting schemes and plays. He had something up over the weekend where it was one of the service academies. I want to say Navy, but I'm not positive if it was Navy. But one of the service academies running counter gap from a double wing condensed formation with some orbit motion from under center. I'd never seen it done like that before. It feels like the ways in which you can run the scheme are almost limitless. The Steelers opened their game yesterday in Chicago in jumbo personnel, which is a package that puts 6 offensive linemen on the field together along with 300-pound tight end Darnell Washington. And they put Spencer Anderson, an offensive tackle, in the backfield as a fullback. And they ran counter gap. Fullback or running back jab steps one way, counters back, follows big Spencer Anderson up into the hole. If you want to know more about the counter gap run play, tune in Wednesday. It will be the subject of our Whiteboard Wednesday show where we'll take a deep dive into it. But it's cool to see a scheme that was really popularized back in the 1980s when the Washington Redskins and their offensive line, which at the time was known as the Hogs, guys like Russ Grimm and John Bostic, big, just physical road graders. And they were able to ride that scheme behind running back John Riggins to a Super Bowl title. Counter gap, or counter tray as it would call it at the time, was popular then, seemed to go away for a while, and it's back. Game ball to the counter gap scheme. Game ball, speaking of running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Detroit Lions. Watching Jahmyr Gibbs yesterday reminded me of an old ESPN commercial from the 1990s where they had Atlanta Braves pitchers, Greg Maddux. I think John Smoltz was the other one. It was either Smoltz or Glavine. But it was 2 of the Atlanta Braves star pitchers at the time. Watching maybe Jose Canseco, I think, hit home runs. Maybe it was Sammy Sosa or Mark McGwire, one of those guys. Watching them just hit home runs in batting practice and these girls fawning over them. And the tagline was "Chicks dig the long ball." Chicks dig the long ball. And I thought about that yesterday as I watched Jahmyr Gibbs on the first play of overtime in the Lions' victory over the New York Giants take an inside zone run straight up the gut and go 69 yards for a touchdown with it, in which he just raced past the entire Giants secondary. It was about as straight a line as you can draw from handoff to end zone. It was just straight up speed. Next Gen Stats published something about that Gibbs exceeded 22 miles per hour on the play, which was the 4th fastest time recorded this season. Watching him live a week prior when I took my son to the Eagles-Lions game at the Link in Philly, a game that the Eagles just absolutely stifled Detroit's potent offense. The only glimmer of hope the Lions had that night was when they got Jahmyr Gibbs on the perimeter. And he was able to take a couple of swing passes and turn them into chunk plays. He is lightning with the ball in his hands. And I read something over the weekend that said that the Tennessee Titans, back in the 2021 maybe draft, whatever year it was that Gibbs came out, they still had Derrick Henry at the time. It was the last year of Derrick Henry in Tennessee. And they targeted Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. Their plan was to pair Jahmyr Gibbs with Derrick Henry. And Gibbs was supposed to fall until later in the first round, or not fall necessarily, but that was really the target range where he was expected to be picked, and Tennessee was going to take him. But the Lions surprised everybody by taking him at number 13, and so Tennessee never got to act on their wishes there. But my goodness, can you imagine a Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs backfield. Yesterday, Gibbs finished the day with 15 carries for 219 yards, 264 total yards yesterday. It's the second time this year he's been over 250 total yards. He is lightning, absolute lightning. Honestly, in today's NFL, the way the game is played in space, if I were starting my team, if I could pick any running back in the league to start a team, I'm pretty sure I'd take Jahmyr Gibbs. He can run between the tackles. He's phenomenal as a receiver. He's the best back in the league in space. And if you're an opposing defense or a fan of the opponent, anytime he touches the ball, you hold your breath. Now, flipping it over to the other side of the ball, game ball, Houston Texans defense. For their stifling performance on Thursday night, where they sacked Josh Allen 8 times, picked him off twice in a big 23-19 win that keeps Houston's playoff hopes alive. They've now rallied to win 3 straight games with Davis Mills at quarterback, replacing C.J. Stroud. They are first in the NFL in points allowed, giving up just 16.3 points per game. They're first in the NFL in fewest yards allowed. They give up just 258 a game. If, as an offense, if you're only able to generate 16 points and 258 yards, you're probably going to lose. The Bills could only score 19 points the other night. And even though they were facing Davis Mills and a less than potent Houston offense, they lost that game. Buffalo has now lost 7 out of the last 8 where they have scored less than 20 points. You got to score points to win. And if you're going up against that Houston defense, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to score many points. Will Anderson, if it wasn't for Myles Garrett, who's got 18 sacks and is threatening to break the NFL sack record, if it wasn't for Myles Garrett, I think Will Anderson would be my defensive player of the year. He is a problem for opposing offenses. And here's the thing that makes the Houston defense so good. I was watching them Thursday night and I was saying, what do they do that separates them from other defenses? And it's not obvious. It's not like, Will Anderson is as good as he is. He's not a big name yet nationally. But what they do is this. 1, they get after the passer. If you can rush the passer, you're going to be pretty good on defense. 2, they can cover. They don't have coverage breakdowns. You don't ever see receivers running wide open against the Texans. They execute their scheme really, really well. And 3, they tackle. So they rush the passer. They're fundamentally sound in their execution, and they're fundamentally sound in their tackling. That is a great recipe to be a good defense. And it doesn't sound that hard. Hey, find some good edge rushers and guys that can run and tackle well. But it's the NFL. And to do all of those things on a weekly basis at a high level is challenging. And the Texans do it. Great debate right now as to who the best defense in the NFL is. You could argue it's Denver, who's threatening to break the team's sack record. You could argue it's Philly, even though they had that huge meltdown yesterday against Dallas. You could make an argument for the Rams. But right now, I think all the numbers say it's the Houston Texans. All right, let's finish with this. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, and we'll wrap it up here. Game ball, Thanksgiving. Game ball to Thanksgiving. Not only is it a phenomenal day if you're a foodie. I'm the chef at our house. I do all the cooking. I'm going to head out later today to the supermarket and do the shop, the Thanksgiving shop. And we'll load it up, man. We'll get after it on Thanksgiving. We got about 25 or so people coming to our house. We've been doing that now for at least a decade. It's great to have all our family here. Great to see everybody. Great to be thankful for things. Awful lot to be thankful for, man. It doesn't feel that way a lot. I have stopped watching the news. I've just stopped. I can't do it. I was a government and politics teacher for 30 years. For 30 years, it was my job to know everything that was going on in that particular world. And when I retired last January, I just said, I'm going to take a little hiatus. I don't miss it even a little bit. I'm not saying ignorance is bliss. I'm not saying you shouldn't be informed. I still go out and vote. But the consumption of that kind of media was exhausting. And I've found myself a little more peaceful, a little more thankful, a little more focused on the things that really mean a lot to me since I've taken a step back from the world of politics. And so I can be grateful and thankful for the many things in my life that are worthy of my gratitude. And I hope you all can do the same. It's not easy for everyone. Holidays can be tough for a lot of people. But if you have things you love and people you love, and if you have things in your life that you cherish, great opportunity on Thanksgiving to honor them. So I hope everybody has a great day. On Friday, after you've gluttoned up, get some exercise. You're going to need it. And we will be back here throughout the week. Wednesday, Whiteboard Wednesday, like I said, deeper dive on counter gap. Friday, Pez for our hot route conversation. Always good stuff. So I hope you'll join us. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Take care.